This is the Elite Entrepreneurs Podcast, where we teach you the proven methods to grow your seven-figure business to 10 million and beyond. Please welcome your host, Brett Gilliland.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Elite Entrepreneurs Podcast. Every week, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing a guest who has been there, done that to some extent. And our guest today certainly has been there, done that when it comes to growing multiple businesses past that $1 million mark and into multiple seven figures, even eight figures with some of these businesses. And I'm just really thrilled to have him here. Welcome to the show, Alan. We're glad to have you here.
I'm excited to do this with you, Brett. This is going to be fun.
Let me go ahead and give you a little bit more of a formal introduction here before we jump into the interview. Alan Underwood is from Momentum Capital Group, and we can talk more about that. He's also heavily involved in some charitable work with an organization called Angel Flight West, which I'm also excited to talk about. But before we get to those, let me talk about some of Alan's past. Alan is a passionate pilot, entrepreneur, real estate developer, and investor. He loves public speaking and using his voice for good to make a difference in the lives of others. Listen to this, folks. He's had success. He's built a reputation for launching and scaling successful businesses in a variety of industries: restaurants, automotive, insurance, aviation, and real estate. So he's done this across multiple types of industries, multiple types of business models, and he's done it successfully. So I'm grateful to have him here. At just 22 years old, he started his first business, a pizza restaurant chain, with no prior business or restaurant experience, and he grew the chain to multiple locations and eventually sold the restaurants to pursue other opportunities. Then he went on to the car dealership, which he grew to over 16 million in revenue. Now he's a full-time real estate developer and investor and gets involved with this Angel Flight West that we'll talk about. So, Alan, very impressive what you've done in your life. Started out really young, like many entrepreneurs do, and you're one of these serial entrepreneurs who just keeps doing new and cool things. So why don't you give us a little bit of an insight into your main projects now, if it's the Momentum Capital Group and Angel Flight West or whatever else you want to highlight. But I'd love to hear from you what you're working on now.
Fantastic. Well, I want to lead that with Angel Flight West because that is, I really believe at my core that the more that we give, the more that we get in return. And Angel Flight West is a way for me to use something that I love, I'm passionate about, aviation, something that I really feel has saved my life in a very meaningful way to give back to others. So Angel Flight West is a 501c3 nonprofit, started 40 years ago. We have about 2,000 volunteer pilots, and these are guys just like me who use their own aircraft and they donate their time. They pay the entire cost of the flight to help people in need get to medical care that's far from their home. That can be, like a 4-hour drive, like from Yuma to Phoenix is a common flight that we do, or it can be something much longer. We fly up to 1,000 miles away. So and it's across many different needs. Our primary mission is non-emergency medical, transplant patients, cancer treatment, burn victims and survivors. But we also do flight for victims of domestic violence and abuse, so we can help them get away from that situation. We fly in support of other charities, so we do blood and tissue donation flights. We do flights with active duty military personnel and with veterans. So it's a wonderful organization. One of the things I love about it is we have an operating budget of about $2 million. And we raise funds for that. But last year, for an example, our pilots donated in like-kind donations over $8 million. So we're the only charity that I know of that can come to you and say, hey, great news, if you donate $100, we are going to multiply that 4 times in the giving that we provide.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, and I just having you talk about it, I just see this in my mind, this army of volunteer pilots who are giving of their time and means to help these people in need. That's remarkable. So I appreciate you mentioning that. So you spend a fair amount of time and energy on that, or at least you have a lot of passion around that project. Talk to us about your for-profit efforts with Momentum Capital Group.
Yeah, so Momentum Capital Group is the direct product of a mastermind. So I joined a mastermind group last year, and in that mastermind met my now partner. His name's Christian. Christian had been a broker in San Diego for several years and had really created wealth for himself by buying single family homes, building an additional unit on the back of that property. And then in his case, he's holding them. And what happens in that, the very basic model is you're going to buy a house up for about $1 million. You'll spend about $400,000 on that ADU. And then that property in today's market at the minimum is going to sell for $2.1 to $2.2 million. So in 12 to 18 months, we can create $700,000 to $800,000 in equity. And now we're taking that opportunity to investors. So our goal over the next 3 years is $50 million in capital raised. And our projections for accredited investors are 35 to 42% return on that money in 12 to 18 months.
It's a cool opportunity. Wish I had millions of dollars sitting around to help with that. Anyway, well, let's back up now. So that's a cool project you're working on now, but you've owned and grown and exited several businesses. And while this show doesn't focus on the exit element, it assumes most of the time that you've had some growth, you've had some success in that business. And I'd like to talk about some of the lessons you've learned as you've gotten to that point where you've made the transition from owner operator, right, very heavily involved in the day-to-day, to building the team and scaling the business to higher levels of impact and growth. And just like to dig in on some of the things that you personally learned in that journey over multiple times as you've built several businesses. So we don't have to start anywhere in particular. I'd rather not go all the way back to, pure startup mode. I'd like to get to the place where this thing was working. It's off the ground. It's, 8 or 10 people maybe. And then some of the lessons that you learned to get through some of the common sticking points in scaling a business like that. So pick your favorite business today. Which one do you want to talk about, Alan?
Well, that's a very interesting question to start on because I actually feel like that was my own personal biggest weakness was that transition from startup and you're doing everything yourself to bringing in other people and allowing them to help with that. And then the most difficult step beyond that, which really I feel like I'm still learning how to do that, would be then allowing them to do it while you envision bigger projects and growth in a different way. So I feel like I'm in the middle of that right now, especially with Momentum. I think a great example of that would be with our pizza restaurants, especially. There's a limit to the number of hours that and the amount of work that you can do. Now, I didn't know that at 22 years old. I just thought that it was normal to show up at 4 o'clock in the morning and then not leave until 11 o'clock that night. And that was a lot of fun while my wife was doing that with me. And as soon as we started having kids and all of a sudden she wasn't there, that's when I realized, oh, this isn't that much fun to be here. And I really need to put systems in place to where I can manage these and have a life outside of the business so that I am not the business. And that was the beginning of developing systems down to the fact where I needed to know that if I walked into one of our restaurants at any time, I could walk through the dining room and I knew exactly what state of management we were experiencing because the red pepper and Parmesan cheese shakers were supposed to be on one side of the napkin dispenser and the salt and pepper on the order, and they're supposed to be in the middle of the table. And so very quickly by walking in, if that stuff wasn't that way, I knew that we had bigger problems. So I think for me is where you have to start is you have to observe your business from outside, where if you're just walking through or if maybe you were peering in with binoculars or something, that you could just look around and tell very quickly what was going on. And that gave me an idea of how people were performing. And we had some success with that with some managers, and with others, we probably allowed them to stay longer than we should have. And they just never could quite grasp some of those systems. And so every facet of the business, I feel what I've learned now is at that time I started building those systems after we were already up and running and things were going. With Momentum Capital, it's the complete opposite of that, where I feel like we really did spend months and months and months looking at those things before we brought the product out to other people to experience, because I didn't want to have to build it after we were already running.
Yeah, you probably had a little bit of perspective and maybe some time and I don't know, financial patience to be able to develop those early, like beforehand this time versus building the thing while it's flying early on
Right.
in life. Yeah. So a lot of us experience that feeling of being stretched thin. You described 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. That's crazy. I like the restaurant business just kind of boggles my mind to begin with. Those business owners just there's a new level of respect from me on the amount of work and presence that requires, at least what I perceive it requires. It's a lot. And that's with one location. So how many locations did you end up having in that pizza restaurant or in that pizza business?
Yeah, in 5 years, we went from our very first one to having 4 locations that we owned completely, and then a partnership in one other location.
Okay.
So we had 5 locations total, and it was a challenge. And I would love to say that I learned that lesson so well that I didn't have to learn it again. I was taught from a young age, and maybe a lot of other people are too, but my dad and my grandpa both taught me that the way to succeed in life was to show up early, stay late, and work harder than everybody else. And so I really believed that that was the recipe for success. And so that's what I did. I showed up early, I stayed late, and I felt like I outworked everyone else. That carried over into the car dealerships, and actually is a contributing reason to why I still don't have them today, because I burned out. And it wasn't just the overworking. We had it beginning in 2016, my youngest daughter was born with a serious birth defect. She spent multiple months in the NICU on the edge of life and death. And then when she came out of the hospital, she didn't sleep through the night for more than a year. So she'd sleep an hour or two at a time. And so we were extremely sleep deprived. 2018, we found out that my mother-in-law had cancer. And a week later, she passed away. 13 months after that, we lost my father-in-law to cancer. And 13 months after that, we lost my dad to a massive stroke. So in the period of from 2018 to 2020, we lost 3 parents in 2 years. And under normal operating circumstances, working all the hours, showing up early, staying late, outworking everyone, that can work. It worked for me, but when life shifts and now all of a sudden you're hit with emotional challenges, mental challenges as a result of grief and trauma and everything else that comes along with those experiences, then you recognize where your weaknesses were. And for me, I recognized pretty quickly that I couldn't handle doing it anymore. And so we ended up selling. And there's a phrase that I've learned, and it actually came to me when I started the dealership. So I was working for a car dealer at the time, and I'd let them know I was going to leave to open my own place. One of the owners of that dealership sat down in front of me and he says, "Alan, I just want you to know that you're making the worst mistake of your life." And I looked back and I said, "And I just want you to know that one of us is." And you could say that he was right. That was the beginning of 2007, right before the market crashed. And I went from making $150,000, $200,000 a year as a 26-year-old dealership manager to the next year as an owner being $40,000 more in debt, and at the end of the year bringing home $7,000. We figured out how to make it work, and that worst decision became the best decision I'd ever made up to that point in business. The same thing happened at the other end, is because I hadn't learned delegation to the degree that I needed to, because too many of the processes ran through me. When I didn't work, the business didn't work as well. And the option that I took was to sell it. And you could look at that and say that that was the worst decision of my life, because I could still have a thriving business today, But that forced growth in different areas that I never anticipated and has opened up opportunities now where, in fact, I told my partner, Christian, I said, do you realize that I've been doing business for more than 20 years? And until this point, the jewel on my cap was that I built that car dealership over 13 years from startup to $16 million a year. What we're doing now is we're building a business that's 10 to 15 times that size in a quarter of the time. And that wouldn't be possible without really some major internal work and growth on my part and relying on the partnership that we have in place to carry their part of that load.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. That sounds like you and your family went through quite a series of experiences from 2018 to 2020, and then we go into pandemic mode right after that. So interesting how life can throw those curveballs. And you're right. I mean, hard work, that kind of work ethic. If I were you, I'd be thanking my dad and my grandfather for instilling in me that kind of work ethic. And I would also want to pile onto that and say, let's bring that level of work ethic, and then let's figure out how to build a team so that it doesn't all thrive or fail based on what we can do and make happen as the superhuman entrepreneur. Because when you have to step out, you have to step out. And you clearly had several moments of needing to step away from the business and give your family more time and energy. And sounds like your business hurt those times that you had to step away, hurt some, and we can build it in ways that we don't have to be so integral to making it all happen. So it sounds like you've learned some really great lessons. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, thank you. I think we learn our best lessons often through the most difficult challenges that we face. And, it's easy with kids, especially not to want to allow them to face those really difficult things. In fact, I was just having a conversation with my wife on our morning walk that with some of the things that our kids are facing, I said, the biggest temptation is going to be that we're in a position that we can make it easy. But if we do that, then they don't get to where we want them to be. And they miss out on the learning opportunity, and we miss out on really parenting different. It's the same as business, right? You have to be able to step out and let people have experiences. You have to let sometimes employees fail to a certain degree so that they can learn and grow through that. And those are difficult lessons to learn. And it's difficult not to be in control when some of those things are happening.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I have some things in common when it comes to parenting large families. I think I saw a picture of your family and like, okay, Alan gets what it's like to have a large family. So we've done a lot of parenting coaching types of things to just improve in our parenting. Even just like in business, we need coaches and mentors. And one of the concepts I learned a long time ago that relates to what you were just saying is when we let our kids experience those difficult times, actually is more framed this way: let the kids experience or make mistakes when the overall cost is still relatively low. Imagine them going 3, 4, 5 years down the road and the financial, the emotional, the relationship costs just increasing dramatically as they get older. Let them learn those lessons when they're young and the cost is relatively inexpensive. And I think in our businesses, we got to figure out, how do we let people make mistakes? Because we're so consumed sometimes as the business owners with preserving a customer experience or a standard of excellence, and those things ought to be preserved. And we got to figure out how to let people make mistakes, experience things, especially while those costs are relatively low. Because the longer we wait to let them experience that, the more expensive it gets in lots of facets. So anyway, that just reminded me of what you were talking about.
Yeah, education is expensive no matter how you get it.
That's right. All right. So if you think back to, I want to get one more practical thing out of your experience before we need to wrap up. As you think about you were young with two of these businesses, you were quite young. What was key to your development as a leader? You mentioned the term delegation a couple of times. What did you do? What did you have to go through personally to be able to finally give something to someone else in terms of delegation?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever thought much about that question, Brett. So I think that looking from where I am right now, I would say that when I was young, the objective of life and business was, what can I get? And so I can remember as being 19 years old and telling a friend, by the time I'm 40, which at the time I thought that was like really old, 40 is a long way away. I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 40. And then I got there and realized, number one, it wasn't what I expected. I didn't all of a sudden have $1 million worth and wake up and it was a lack of luxury. I was still doing everything that I was doing the day before. My life hadn't changed very much. It wasn't really until after experiencing grief and depression and everything that came at the end of 2020 where I really had to go and find myself and realize that the greatest success that I can experience, the greatest joy that I can experience is going to come in giving. And that can be in giving experiences or giving responsibility. In the charity that I do, it's giving hope and helping people find healing. But in the business realm, especially as we've gained experience, as we've grown, the greatest gift that we can do is look for those that are around us and give them opportunities, give them responsibilities attached to those opportunities, and then give them also the most important thing, which is love, which you can define that as coaching, you can define that as teaching. Love takes a lot of different forms, but at the end of the day, I believe that that's what everybody is looking for. People will be more attracted to you to the degree that you love yourself and you love others. And that will lead to success in life and business and your family and everything else. So, the greatest lesson that I've learned over the last couple of years was learning how to love myself so that I had enough love that I could give to others. And if you love the people that you're working with to the degree that you want them to be more successful than you are, which is how I feel about my partners right now, I would love nothing more than to see them. They're both quite a bit younger than I am. Christian's 27, and Stephen is late 30s, and for them to be able to, for me to be able to give some of the lessons I've learned so that they can climb to higher heights, it's so motivating and enjoyable for me.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Providing flights to those who need it, to lifting other people through your care, your genuine care, love, as you describe it, is something just above what most of us deal with every day on a transactional level in our businesses. But I think you're onto something. I believe that is the thing in our leadership, that we care, we genuinely care. We went so far as to create a leadership model that we share with our community of seven-figure business owners. And it's got things that you would expect, like, here are the 3 things they need to do: set the vision, build the team, get the resources, right? Don't run out of cash. Like, those are the responsibilities of a leader. But right in the middle, we drew this little heart and we wrote care. If you do those things from a place of love, from a place of genuine care, you're not going to have a hard time getting people, and you're going to have a lot of fun lifting and developing them, and the business is going to do well. So anyway, couldn't agree more. Thank you, Alan, for that insight. It was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I love that you've put the heart right at the middle of your coaching model and your teaching model. What a gift to your community.
Well, I was just doing a me too on that. I was doing a +1 on what you shared. I couldn't agree more. So anyway, Alan, it's been a sincere pleasure. If people want to learn more about your charity work or get involved with your Momentum Capital Group, like, how would they connect with you or one of these wonderful things that you're working on?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Angel Flight West is easy. It's angelflightwest.org. That's if you're a pilot, you want to volunteer. If you're not a pilot, you want to volunteer or donate, or if you know somebody who's traveling a great distance, or a loved one who's traveling to be with that person. Angelflightwest.org is where you can find us. If you connect with me on social media, I think it's the Alan Underwood on LinkedIn. You can message me there and I can help provide information on that charity. Our capital group, if you're investing or if you're just curious about real estate, what we have going on, that's mmtmgrp.com, and you can schedule a call with me. That's how you can find me, and I I love nothing more than getting on the phone with people and seeing how I can help move them from where they are to the next great place in their life.
It's awesome. We'll make sure to include those things in our show notes. If you're listening, please like, share, do all those things to make sure that this podcast gets in front of as many seven-figure business owners as possible. Every week we have great guests like Alan who are just sharing their actual insights from real experience, and it just doesn't get any better. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening, and keep growing.
You've been listening to the Elite Entrepreneurs Podcast with your host, Brett Gilliland. Be sure to leave a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. You may also want to visit our website, eliteentrepreneurspodcast.com, to find additional resources to grow your business from 7 figures to 10 million and beyond.